My name is Moshe Shwed. Thank you very much for coming. I'm director of All Daf, All Torah. I'd like to first thank all the people that helped put this event together. The seed was planted. It wasn't for a Siyum on Nedarim. My cousin Nachman Shwed was here somewhere, reached out a while back and said, is there any way we could put together a shir on practical Hilchos Nedarim? Now, the question I got when I was talking to people about this was, are there any relevant halachas that are, I know we say bli neder, do we have to, don't we have to, how many halachas are there that are relevant to day-to-day life? And I live in Lakewood, and I heard a Rav give 3 Sunday morning shiurim on it. So there's certainly practical halachas that come up daily that are relevant to Nedarim. So Rabbi Yossi Weberman was the top candidate in the area to give this shir. Thank you to him. I would like to thank Mr. Mitch Ader, newly minted president of the OU, for coming. And on behalf of the OU, Rabbi Hauer, Moshe Hauer, Josh Joseph, I would also like to thank Moshe Brandsdorfer, who I work with, Usher Tesser, who's here, who all work to have all Daf and all Parsha and all Mishnah working on a daily basis. I would like to thank the Berger and Ehrlichman families for sponsoring and dedicating this breakfast and this shir and this Siyum. We've had an All Daf Siyum sponsor from the beginning. The Goldberg family has been dedicating Siyumim in memory of Yitzchak Isaac ben Eliezer, who was a person who was sick his whole life. They always say, I've said this a bunch of times, he was someone who was in the hospital over 250 times. He passed away, he was 47, someone who constantly persevered. Certainly a lesson for those who are doing the daf on a day-to-day basis. I would like to thank Davi Safir, who put me in touch with the other Askanim here in the shul, putting this all together. Ariel Aber, thank you for bringing your chevra. And I think we covered everybody. If I missed anybody, thank you to everybody else. I just want to say one short, as I was driving up here from Lakewood this morning, I was thinking, there's a famous Mishnah, I didn't even bring the Mishnah down in front of me, famous Mishnah, that Yosef ben Kisma was met by somebody, and he said to him, and he was asked to come move to that person's area, and he said that even if you give me all the money in the world, Eini dar elab makom Torah. So the simple pshat is, even if I'm the wealthiest guy in the world, I'd rather sit and learn Torah in a makom Torah. But I saw the Medrash Shmuel says a fascinating pshat, and I was thinking about how it's relevant when you come to this community and a shul, and we're having a shir here. He said it doesn't mean that he said, I want to be, even from the wealthiest person in the world, I prefer to have Torah. It means that he's going to have all the money in the world, not he's the wealthiest. There's no one else is going to have any money besides for him. And he's going to have to support everybody. Every tzedakah, every moisid, every ani is going to have to get their money and their sustenance from him. So he's going to have quite a lot of schar, and it gets up to Shemaim. He's supporting the whole world. He said, Afal Pikein, the schar of living and learning in a Makim Torah is greater than supporting and giving everything else, every penny that he has, to everybody else in the world. So to be able to come to a place where they are machzik Torah and are supporting Torah and supporting organizations in and out of the neighborhood, and at the same time being able to create shiurim, all the shuls that are here and all the moistis that are here, it's certainly, you have both milas. Without further ado, Rabbi Weberman.
It's a schus to be here. Thank you, Moshe Shwed and Moshe Brandsdorfer, for his persistence. And the special thank you to the Ehrlichman and Berger families. It should be a schus from Menachem Avram ben Moshe ben Yamin. And some of the things were appropriate. We were talking about Mishram, like Nidrei Tzedakah, etc. There's a big about tzedakah, and everyone knows this is not an appeal, by the way. Their families are very special families. I'm zeichet to have them as good friends, so I'm doubly appreciative. When they originally asked me, Moshe Brandsdorfer said, can you give me some questions that you want to talk about? Something like the whole end of Nedarim is like koinim this, koinim this. I'm like, okay, if your wife says koinim, if your wife says you're koinim that I'm not going to get any enough from you, what's the din? So the first thing is you need a therapist as well. But we're not going to deal with that shiloh. We're going to deal with one shiloh over here. Try to deal with a few shilohs and get into a little bit of the lumdus, a little of the background, and then we'll see if we run out of time. I don't see a clock here, which is usually not a good thing. So you'll have to tell me when, like a 10-minute warning, or you'll give me I'll bleed out to give it back to you. Depends what it's with. Okay. So the question is like this. The Gemara says on Daf Tes Amud Aleph that there's a machlekes whether it's good. The Gemara says, the pasuk says, "Toivish lo tidar, mishatidar v'lo tishalim." Is machlekes between Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda whether it's better to make a neder and better one should. No. I know I don't need a microphone because my family always tells me I'm very loud, and so I definitely this is for the video here. It's not going to help you. It's like this. There's a machlekes on Daf Tes between Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda whether someone should go and so whether it's better to make a neder and fulfill it or better not to make a neder at all. And it's a machlekes on Daf Tes Amud Aleph, and then the Gemara in Yud comes out that the machlekes is talking about a nedava, and the etzem is really one should not make a neder at all. And the Rishonim over there, the Rosh and the Ramban, say that we see that if a kosher shouldn't make a neder, so if someone wants to go and give money, if you have the money, go and give, and if you don't have the money, then be quiet and don't give. So the chayra comes out, and if there's an appeal, you say bli neder. The Ritva at the end of in the back of in the Dapei Rif says that it says Vayidu Yaakov Lemar, meaning neder Lemar, meaning he made a neder. He was leaving Yaakov from Haran. He was going to Beersheva Harana. He was leaving Beersheva and he went to Haran. So he says over there it was considered an Eis Tzara, and he decided to make a neder. So over there, for an Eis Tzara, you can make a neder. So Ritva says, even for a choyle, it would be mutter to say, I'm going to give money if I have a refuah. But he says, because of this, there are some mekaymes that are noig to give tzedakah and shem and lamar to pay for the electricity on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur alone, because the Sifrei Chaim are open in front of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And it says, what happens? So it's an Eis Tzara, and therefore, in order to they want to be saved from the din, right? They can give the money. And he says, they give it the next day immediately, right? And he says, what about other cases that people are knowing to give on Shabbos and Yom Tov? He could be Me'ash of the Minog because they're doing it because it's a Yom Kenufya. People are all there and the Niyam are going to need the money. And also the Gabayim are going to come to collect it the next day. And the Ritva says they're going to come to even collect it with force, right? We're going to collect in force. So the question over here is that what about Bisman Hazer? So the Shulchan Aruch says in Reish Gimel, Sif Dalid, that Tzarech Lizar, you should be careful not to make a neder, shum davar. Even for tzedakah, it's not good to make a neder unless you have the money you give, and if not, don't make a neder, ad shiel, until you have the money. V'im poskim tzedakah, v'tzarech lifsak imayim, yomer bli neder. And if you have to give the money, you should go and give the money bli neder. You should go, if you have to make a pledge, say bli neder. So Rav Moshe says in Dibros Moshe, in Nedarim over there, he says in the Horus that he says that there's a minute for many years to go and make a neder barabim for the tzarech the beis knesses and the Doros Achronim. They were noig also to give a neder when they would get an aliyah, and that's the tzarech for the tzedakah for the aniyim and the tzarech beis knesses. Because what's going to happen if you go and say bli neder? So everyone's going to go and say bli neder, right? And then when it comes time for collecting, people won't go and pay. So therefore, he said you're allowed to say it stam and give it with it's considered a neder, and therefore you don't have to worry about people forgetting it because they're embarrassed and the gabarim will come and collect. But if there would come a time that people would go and there would be achshir dore and that you wouldn't have to go and say you wouldn't have these problems over here of someone forgetting and not paying up, then it would not be a problem. You should say bli neder. You shouldn't say lashon bli neder. Again, and even if you know, he says that. If you're going to go and be mefarish and explain that you're going to say bli neder and you know you're going to pay after Shabbos and Yom Tov, still you should say it's stam and you should memela will be considered a neder. Why? Because if you say bli neder, again, everyone else is going to follow after you and it's going to end up being a loss for the shul. So Moshe holds that you should go say it's stam and it will be considered like a neder, and that's how you should make your appeal. Rav Moshe Sternbach in Tshuvas Van Haggis, he says that he has this shaila over here. This is Asering Shetels. We'll save that for another time. He says over here, if someone gets an aliyah and makes an atana, what should they do? He says the minhag is that we say in our kehila bli neder, and he has a whole shtickle Torah over here that there's a din of moitz. Even if you say bli neder, it'll only absolve you from a neder. But if that won't absolve you from your obligation to give any money, because there's still a din of moitz sefasech tishmar. That if you went and said it, you have to be erlich and you have to go and say it. If you said it, you have to go and keep your word. So therefore, you won't, in terms of the neder part, you're not going to be obligated, but lagabi, the dinim of Maitzah Sefasecha Tishmar, you're still going to have to go and give your pledge. So my mother, Erev Shabbos, told me, she said, I heard you giving a share on Nedarim. I'm going to give you $1 million. She said, Bli neder. She said, now I don't have to pay you. I said, well, actually, Moitzah Sifasech Tishmar. I said, I can make a payment plan for you. $1 million you plan on giving out slowly. But I think she holds like the end of Moshe Sternbach, because her end he says, Ulai, maybe Medina, by Bli neder is considered like you're explicitly saying that you shouldn't have any eschayvis midin Torah. And maybe it means, it could be, maybe he means that you're totally exempt. It's an interesting thing he says at the end, that he says this, he's noig b'siyata ishmaya every so often to give a certain amount of money to tzedakah on behalf of those people who pledged money to the Beis HaKnesses and didn't pay. So he wants to go and absolve them from the Nedarim. No pressure. I'm in the beach shul. The matanas are a little bit lower. Either way, well, the chayra, that would be a nice thing. But the chayra it's machlekes. I think many people say Bli neder, and Moshe Shlomo says you shouldn't say bavur sheyitain. You should say kish sheyitain when you give. Now, the Gemara in Tezvav seems to say that if there's and it's also Gemara in Psachim, that if there's a concept of hanhagatov, if people are noig to do something, they're accustomed to do something, then it can be considered like a neder. Now, obviously we're coming out now. You should say Bli neder. It doesn't make a difference what you're planning. You're planning giving out $2 to stock every day, right? Whatever you're planning on doing, just say Bli neder. Right? So the question is that there are certain concepts of hanhagatov that if you go and do something, if you do it one time with das to continue to do it forever, you have to say Bli neder before the first time. Or if you do it 3 times in a row, and then by the third time you should say Bli neder as well. But if you didn't, then you would need to be matter in front of a chacham. So the question is, what's considered what type of neder? What's considered a neder over here? So what's considered an hagatova? So like let's say it's like hard to find an example. But like let's say, just off the top, like let's say your wife asks you you decide you're going to listen to your wife 3 times in a row. I don't mean 3 times within like a minute period. Take out the garbage. I mean like 3 times in a row. Is that considered an hagatova? You think we should pick a more practical example, right? Yeah. Many times. So the Shach says, the Mechaber brings first in Reish Yudali, the Dvarim that are mutter, and you know that they're mutter, but you're noig in Isser, it's considered like you're makabel a neder, and you're not allowed to be matter them, right? And therefore, someone who regularly fasts, right, in the Rosh Hashanah and the Sarsi Tshuva, and so on, right? And therefore, he says, and he's not well, he has to be matter neder. He has to be matter neder. And the Shach explains, what is it talking about? We're talking about something that's a siyog and a geder and a precious. The Aruch HaShulchan over here brings that it's also something because of chasidus. Now the Shach goes and qualifies this, and he says that it's not shaykh to say that you're matter with charata, only something that some people are noig and not all people. And meaning, like the lashon is something's mutter vacherim noigin boy iser, meaning that there's a section of Klal Yisrael that holds as mutter and some hold that it's aser. But which Klal Yisrael is noig and they were makabel upon themselves, you can't go and be matter. Like Pashtus is, let's say 6 hours between meat and milk, you can't go and be matter. Right? If you hold it. If someone's a choyle, then it's a din choyle, and they were never makabel upon themselves the 6 hours in such a case, that's an exception. But the Pashtus is that one cannot go and be makel on that. However, the Shach brings a stira, and he says that we have a problem over here. Over here, it seems that if someone's not well, let's say he's fasting is Sarsi Tshuva, and he's not well. He's not machma she'ein bari, and he wants to go and be chayzer because he's not well. So he needs to be matter neder. So the Shach says, what do you mean? In Tavkov Samaches, this is in your idea. In Tavkov Samaches in Archaim, he's talking about the case of fasting. If a bris milah happens to come out there, one is not obligated to fast. So he says, what's the distinction over there? Over there, if the bris comes out, he doesn't have to fast, and over here, he comes out. If someone's not well, he has to. There, again in Archaim, he doesn't have to fast if a bris comes out during Sarsi Tshuva, and over here, if he's not well, he has to fast. So the Shach goes and says that when I was makabel upon myself the fast to Sarsi Tshuva, so what am I makabel upon myself? I'm makabel myself the minhag to fast to Sarsi Tshuva. Built in that minhag was not to fast if a bris comes out on it. But over here, when it never dawned on me that I wasn't going to be well, so therefore it wasn't built into my original Kabbalah if I'm not well, I won't have to fast. So again, he makes the distinction between Archaim and Yeridea is that if there's tshuva, in Tavkov Samaches it's tshuva, so therefore I was being makabel upon myself, right, what the minhag is. The minhag is that if a bris comes out, I don't have to fast. But over here, I wasn't thinking about it, and therefore it's not included in my Kabbalah, therefore I won't be well, and therefore I have to fast. The Dogam of Vava, which is a very important Dogam of Vava, which I want to point out again, it's only going on Hagas Tov, it's not going on a regular neder. He says he doesn't agree with the Shach, and he says no. The difference is what is the nature of my retraction? If my retraction is a permanent retraction, which is our case over here in Yeridea, that I'm not well, so then he said, I don't want to go back to fasting. I want to totally break my neder. So then I have to need to be matir neder. But if it's just a temporary pause for some sort of reason, if there's a michush, or for example, there's a bris milah, so I'm not stopping it. I'm just taking a temporary pause and I'm going back to my anhaga tova. So on that, I don't have to go and be matir neder. He says that's very good with the Magen Avram, because the Magen Avram says that if someone at Erev Rosh Hashanah is not feeling well, he doesn't have to fast, meaning because he's going to be going back to his neder, and therefore it's his anhaga tova, and therefore it's not a problem. So again, we have two pshatim over here. One, the Shach says that when I was makabel upon himself, it was based on what the minhag is. And the minhag is if there's a bris, I don't have to fast, and but Mashenkin by over here not being well, that was never my Kabbalah, and therefore I'd have to be matir neder. But the Dogma of Vav is saying a very important aside that if it's on Haga Tova and I want to go and I'm going to go back to it, I just have some reason, he says, or some sort of michush. Meaning if I'm not feeling well and I'm eventually going to go back to it, it's not going to be a problem, and I don't need to be matir neder. And he says this is good with the Magen Avram. Again, if I'm not going to be well, if someone's not well, Erev Rosh Hashanah, he can break. He doesn't have to fast because he's going to go back to it. It's interesting because there's a Magen Avram, a different Magen Avram. So he's trying to establish that his vart goes in the Magen Avram. The Magen Avram is a mechaikes and kuf samach beis and archaim, whether you have to wash up until here or up until here. So it's mechaikes the rif and the rush. So the Magen Avram says before you start doing this, before you start washing all the way up to after the palm by your arms, you have to make a tanai. What's your tanai? Because what happens if I don't have water? I'm going to be stuck and have water, and I'm going to have a problem of a neder. But what's saying? According to the Dogma of Vava, I'm only stuck. It's a one-time thing. So therefore, I shouldn't have to make a tanai. So why does the Magen Avram say that you have to make a tanai? So it could be maybe it's possible. I found Rav Dushinsky says in his Chuvas that he wants to say a chiluk over here. He says that by a dover, it's a very sadistic chiluk. He says by a dover that's a minog and it's a siyag and a geder, it needs a Torah. In other words, when I come and say, I'm makabel upon myself as a siyag, I want to protect it. It's more of a geder of like a loy plug. So therefore, if I'm makabel upon myself, it's across the board. There's no wiggle room. But when I'm being makabel upon myself something for tshuva, right? Makabel something for tshuva, so then there's wiggle room. So if I do tshuva, if I don't do now, I'll do tomorrow. It wasn't as strict as a Kabbalah that there's no wiggle room. So therefore, again, if it's a siyag, I'm being makabel, just like the din is that you're not allowed to. Let's say I want to keep mashal. Let's say I want to keep I want to keep Shabbos Rabbeinu Tam. So there, I'm doing it because it's a siyag, right? It's doing it because it's siyag because I want to keep. Everyone keeps it, and that's why I want to do it. So therefore, I keep it as a siyag to keep the din, and therefore we keep Rabbeinu Tam. So therefore, there's no wiggle room. But if you're just doing it because of fear of Shabbos, what you have to do with Shalom of Bli Neder. But if I just do it because of fear of Shabbos, it's not a practical message. I'm just trying to bring just trying to think of an example now. But if I'm doing it because of a fear of Shabbos, so then maybe it would be, there'd be more wiggle room. So like this. The question would be, so like this. So again, in Aruch Chaim is talking about a din of tshuva, and therefore there's more room to make it. But over here, so if there's a bris, you can eat, right? But over here, it's a siyag in Yeridea, and therefore if he wasn't well, he'd still have to fast. The only problem is that it doesn't answer because cases are both talking about fasting. Let's say Aser Shemei Tshuva. Aruch Chaim is talking about fasting Aser Shemei Tshuva, and in Yeridea is talking Aser Shemei Tshuva. So what's the chiluk? So it could be like this. Maybe that when I'm being makabel upon myself in Yeridea din, so I'm doing it because a sector of people, Klal Yisrael, it's not going to say a social norm, but there are people that fast Aser Shemei Tshuva. So I'm part of that group. It's like the people that keep Rabbeinu Tam. I'm part of that group. Then there's some people because they're scared of Shabbos or whatever it is, right? Then they'll go and keep, they'll go and keep later. They want to end Shabbos later because they love Shabbos or whatever it's going to be. I'm not getting into the practical enough meaning of that Shabbos. Just using an example. So it could be like this. It could be that there are two types of tanesim. There's a tinus because I'm doing it because of the tshuva aspect. Of either it's all because of the tshuva aspect. Another is I'm doing it because it's makubal to do. And if I'm doing something that's makubal to do, that's more of a gather of a light plug. In which case, by the way, the Magen Avram would be very good, because the Magen Avram is saying that on Erev Rosh Hashanah, right, I can fast because I'm doing. If I'm not well, I don't have to fast because I'm doing it because I'm not feeling well, right? But it's because of it's a tshuva, so there's more wiggle room. Masha'enkin over here, where there's a halacha, meaning by Netilas Yadayim, I'm doing it because it's a siyag. So over there's no wiggle room to move around. Al Kopanim, what's going to be the din? The Dogam of Ava seems to be Makubal. I heard from Arabeim that they paskin like it all the time. The Shevet Alevi brings, he said that we paskin like this all the time, that if there's a temporary pause, then, and you're going back to your Hanaga Tova, that's fine. If it's a permanent thing, then you'd have to go and be Matan Neder. So we can give a few examples. Go ahead. Let's say first of all, let's say for example, make it for Shaivim, right? So let's say someone is makbid on the Arzua. Let's say there's Yom Vest and there's the 12 hours before. So, for whatever reason, there's some sort of tzarich that he should ask a rav, someone who knows the halachas, some sort of tzarich has to make it. He doesn't have to necessarily get at 12 o'clock at night 3 people to be matan neder, which would sound be an uncomfortable thing. You can be samich on dagam avava, for sure, it's not a problem. Also, let's say your minhag is to go every Erev Shabbos to the mikvah, or you go on Shabbos to the mikvah, or nashim or toivel a certain amount of times, and now they have a little bit of an earache, they're a little bit nervous, right? So, you always have that one guy in the mikvah Erev Shabbos who does like shy tefillas, you know what I mean? It takes up the whole. So, what? Bli neder. Yeah. Bli neder. She has to make out bli neder. It's on Hagat Tova, yeah. Let's say you're davening v'sikin. Let's say the Mishnah Berurah says that if you're in Nunches, Birulach says if you are the Zehirim to daven v'sikin, so then you should go and if you're b'yechidus, you can go and daven as well b'yechidus. Let's say you don't have a minyan, right? You can daven b'yechidus. So Shlem Zalman says that it's because it's like on Hagat Tova. It's like it's like you were Mekabel Neder, and therefore you can go and you can go and daven b'yechidus because this is your minhag right now. So if it's a one-time thing that you have to break, it's fine. But if there's a valid reason for it, right? But if there's
isn't washing hands we have Yom Kippur? You wash hands
that's the halach. That's what we paskin. What do you mean?
It means you have a break and then whatever the hanag is. Have a break.
Yeah, but that's that hug. I was never makal upon myself on Yom Kippur or Tisha B'av. I was just makal for the rest of the year. In case where I don't have water, what do I do? So in all these cases over here, again, also for Meiser, especially if you have a Bar Mitzvah Bacher, Meiser, let's just say, is a minog, you should be makabel upon, tell your kids to be makabel upon themselves, bli neder. They should also say, by the way, because a lot of people use Meiser money for mitzvahs, that they could also stipulate that you're going to be able to do it for mitzvahs. But in these cases over here, if someone has to go and break it, it's not going to be a problem if it's a one-time thing. If it's a one-time thing or it's a temporary thing. Now, what happens if in terms of nidrate stock over here, if someone says they're going to go and give money to tzedakah, when exactly is the chiyuv going to be chal on them? So you're asking why are we talking about tzedakah? So there are drushes in Rosh Hashanah and others, and the halach in Shulchan Aruch in Reish Nun Zayin, Sif Gimel, that the tzedakah is included in Nedarim, and therefore if someone says Hari Alai Sela L'Tzedakah or Sela Zu L'Tzedakah, he's chayav to give it to the aniyim immediately. V'im icher, and if he delays, he's over Bal Ta'achar. Why? Shar biyodei lite miyad. It's in his hands to give it immediately, and aniyim are mitzuyim. And if there's no aniyim, he should be mafresh and leave it until the aniyim come. In other words, there are two dinim. The first is tzedakah is included in the neder, and therefore someone pledges money, he has to go and give it like a neder. And if there are niyim around, he for sure has to go and give it right away. Otherwise, he's over Bal Ta'achar, and because he has the ability to give it, and there are niyim there, and if there's no niyim, he has to be mafresh and leave it until he comes there. Until
yeah. It doesn't say Harei Olai, it says Harei Zu.
Yeah.
It also has a problem about Ta'achar. Harei Zu Mohammed Aniyim.
Yeah. I mean,
it didn't say he's going to give. It said this is money of Aniyim. That's about Ta'achar.
So yeah. I mean, that's what the Mechaber says. What?
So this money is for Aniyim.
So I have to go and give it. We'll talk about it afterwards. You can argue in Shulchan later. I'll explain though. Like this. Like this, including the Nedarim. So you see there are two dinim over here. One, if there are niyim in front of you, that you have to go and give it to them, and you don't give them, you're going to be Bal Ta'achar. And two, even if there's no niyim, you have to go and be mafresh. Now the question is, when are you going to be over? Are you going to be over every day, or is it going to be kol shav v'shah? So the lashon of the Ritva in Rosh Hashanah is that it's B'kol Shavashah. But the Gemara seems to say, in terms of Karbanis and Rosh Hashanah, that after the Gimel Golan passed, you're over B'chol Yom V'yom. So the same thing would apply over here to tzedakah. It's interesting. There's a ma'aseh with the Chafetz Chaim that's brought that he was makabel. He had an areach, and he wanted right after Ma'ariv. He rushed to go serve him. He said he was going to go take care of him. But it's just for any mitzvah. If someone goes and says, by the way, it says, I'm going to go and give you a ride. I'll meet you there at 12. So it could be I have to really. That's like a Naga Tova. I have to really, or some sort of maybe like in the gather of a neder. I have to go and be there at 12. Right, that's why I see in Sulit it says be'erech they start. It doesn't, not guaranteed. So like this. So it's funny because he says he was rushing because he was scared to take care of the ani because of Bal Tacher. So I don't understand. If you hold, Pasha says Yarv B'chol Yom V'yom. He had a little bit of time. Maybe he held that it was Kol Rega V'Rega. I don't know. He was chayshish. But either way, Al Kopanim, it's B'chol Yom V'yom. Now the Mechaber goes and says that dafka if you're mafresh tzedakah stam, but everyone has the opportunity to kol adam yachol lahafresh mois tzedakah, that they should be by him to give them ma'at al yad meaning kimosh yiraloi, meaning to give it out slowly. So too, if he made a tanai b'shas the neder of tzedakah, right, that or hisnadiv saw that the gaboim would be allowed to go and change it, right, that is going to be mutter. But again, can't repeat enough. Make sure you say bli neder. So. Like this.
Is Nedarim and Bezras Hashem the same thing?
Good question. No. Bezer Hashem is, or Mirch Hashem, or whatever it can be, is just saying that Hashem should give me the koach to be able to do it. But it's not going and taking away the neder. Unless you thought at that time that you're going to give. Because we're going to get to soon, if you think about it in your mind, then that would obligate you. So like this. So if you want to give it out slowly. So the question is, again, the lashon over here is k'moshi yiralai, right? And you should make this tanai. That this tanai would help even if there are niyim around. If you make this tanai, because I want to give it to the ani that I see fit. Now you can't just do this as a shtick because you don't find anyone fit, right? The Aruch Shulchan says that you can do this. He says kamishma galya, meaning you have to be real. So like this. Let's say I go and want to give money to a dinner over here. I'm going to go a minute to yeshiva dinner. So the derech is there's a difference. It seems to be there's a difference between the yechidim and so there's certain moistness, at least for, let's say, yeshiva. Okay, why? Because a yachid needs the money right away. A yeshiva, the way they work it is, first of all, they know that if you give it over time, that you're going to go give more money, right? You'll correct me if I'm wrong, right? And also, by that part you'll agree on, right? So the moisid needs money throughout the whole year. So if you have a bunch of people, the way it's supposed to work is, let's say I'm going to give it out in increments. I'm going to give I pledge $1,000. I'll give $250 quarterly. So everyone's supposed to be doing that, and then hopefully everyone is, and then the yeshiva will be getting money for the whole entire year. But a yachid needs it right away. So for a yachid, when you give it, you have to go and give it. Say you have to give it right away. And really, truth is for Moses, it's really telling when the gabbai is tavei you. But it's your das is when you give it to a moisid, your das is to go and give it out slowly. Right? Now let's say you make a mishaberch or an appeal or something that you're really mechuyev. You question the mechuyev not a miyad or not. So again. If you didn't say bli neder, really, if it's for yachid, you're going to be mechuyev miyad, and then you should be careful. If the gabe comes to you from the moisid, it could be that you have to go and give him that as well. Again, unless your das was beferish, that you didn't want to give it like that. Now it's interesting, by the way. We see Moitzah Sifasech Tishmar Vasisa, and the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says that there's an Harz Bezdin that they can even go and force it, right? And stock is included in the Nedarim, so if they could force it, so Mela they could really force. They can enforce you giving the tzedakah. I was wondering why they have the gabayim. It was Josh. The gabayim. You're like a more bigger guy. You're not such a small guy. So I don't know if you're still the gabay here. But okay. But it's be kedai to get a bigger guy to be the gabay. The Taz says in Choshen Mishpat. The guy says in Choshen Mishpat that for tzedakah, Bezdin can be b'tzion al koi bal karchai. And that's the way it seems in Shulchan Aruch. I mean, we see that we do force. It says kaif and asai to eat matzah. So there's some sort of din. I don't know exactly how you force the guy, but a lawyer told me that correct me if I'm wrong, also, if he's wrong, not if I'm wrong, he's wrong. That he said if you make a pledge, especially in writing, and there's a build for a building campaign, and they start building based on that, on that pledge. Yeah. So then,
don't worry, figure out how to.
Okay, fine. We'll speak after. I have a different shul that has problems. They can go and sue you in court based on that. So there is a din. So now let's say someone makes, hopefully it should be negeh for everyone in the right time, right? Someone makes a lot of money and they want to put it in a charity fund. So, but they didn't have das. So they didn't have das to go and spread it out over time. So what's going to be the din? So l'chayra, if you made the tanai, that would be totally fine, right? Again, if you didn't make the tanai, so it could be that a charity fund is going to be different because when you put it in there, it's considered like your das was explicitly to go and spread it out. Because the first of all, if you go and give it out right away, you're going to just left with for the next 2-3 weeks or a month, people just knocking on your doors, right? Even though every ani says, I will not tell anyone how much you gave. Okay. But and also there's another svara is that bisman hazeh that we don't use gabayim, and rather people give it out themselves. So for sure his kavana was for specific aniyim at the time that he wanted, and therefore you wouldn't be over bal ta'acher. Now, I see the time. I just forgot what time I started. Okay, well, so a few more minutes. Yeah, we'll just speak about the.
Meiser money, same type of thing.
Meiser money should make, Meiser money is like a neder, it's an hagatayva. It's a machlekes, what's the nature of it, but I think we pash this neman that it's a minhag, and Meiser money if you make it tonight before. No, when you mafresh it, it's already, it's Meiser. It's kedai to have a separate account. I mean, depending how your business runs, my pronounce is very simple. It's just I don't have like too many investments. So, but if you have investments, then it gets a little more complicated. But if you have just regular, you put it in a separate Meiser account, or you put it into these, whatever these OJCs or JCFs or whatever it is, and makes life easy. Now, just a few more points. Then, like this, what happens if I thought I was going to plan on giving some tzedakah? So the halacha is that if someone has a machshava to go and give tzedakah, so in Reish Nun Ches, the Ramah brings the Reish Nun Ches. Someone says the Ramah brings like this: that if you choshev beliba litein ezer davar l'tzedakah, you're chayiv to be mekayim your machshava, and you don't need an amira because if you said it, then they could force you to be mekayim it. And then there's yeshayimim that if you didn't articulate it, you're not going to be chayiv. And the ikar is kisvar rishayna that if you were choshev beliba to give something to tzedakah, you have to be mekayim your machshava. Meaning, even though you didn't articulate, you're still going to be chayiv. So the question is, what exactly does it mean, the geder of machshava? So the Magen of Ram, when he's talking about in his tiny, says a here belibai that in Tfilas Mincha that you're mekabel is dafki you're mekabel belibai. Meaning, he says, but if it's only just bedaitoi, that's not called a Kabbalah. The Machas Shekel says over there that if a Kabbalah Gemur, the Aruch HaShulchan says, Gomer believe by Mamish Behechlit, the Shita Mekabetz, as I saw in the Nedarim and Dav Zayin, says, meaning you're an Isyashiv believe to do the tzedakah of Leischarit. And the Ran says in Tess, in a different thing, he says, Rutz and Gomer. It's interesting. So, in other words, it's not a fleeting thought that you thought you were going to give tzedakah. You were concrete in your mind, I know I'm going to give.
That would mean if you're bidding on an Aliyah and there's
Yeah.
a chance you win it,
Yeah.
you made up in your mind at that point.
For sure.
You would give it.
Yeah.
Or you could say you're only giving it if you win it. But
No. I'm not. When I said I was that's all. Yeah, clear.
according
Yeah.
to this far right now, that if
No,
you
because
won Aliyah,
it was out tonight that I'm going to win.
tonight.
Yeah.
Even if you did have a match
Yeah.
at that moment in time, you would have given
Yeah.
it because the chance you would have won.
Yeah, and you're not allowed to do. I think it's called a shill in English. You're not allowed to do like I'm gonna be the guy trying to raise it the whole time. Yeah, it happened one time, by the way, and the person had to go up and say, and they won. So they had to go up and tell the person. It was very impressive. They had to go up and tell the gabbai that I really don't have enough money. I was just trying to up it for the shul. So they went over to the person who gave the last bid, and he said, "I'll take it," which is very impressive because usually it's all part of like the covet, like, okay, one, it's yours. Yeah.
What about committing to learning? So at a Shiva house, when someone signs that they're going to be learning, is that a belief neder?
You have a problem over there because if you don't, how do they make a siyum without you? So definitely it's bli neder, but you have to go and inform them if you're not going to do that, and preferably not the day of. Right? Okay. Therefore,
Every time I sign my name over, I believe neder.
yeah, exactly. And then hopefully they'll be smart enough to get another guy to do it.
I'll do it on the Nedarim.
Exactly. So therefore, like this. So let's say you go and what happens like this? I decided I'm going to start to give to a certain ani, and this guy left and he's gone. So again, you should always say bli neder, but if you didn't, there's a guy walks in, I plan on giving it to him. So if I was makabel machshav and I plan on going and giving it, I plan on going and giving it to this ani over here. So now this ani's gone. So what do? So it's interesting that you're really not allowed to be meshana from one stock to the next. So if you can't find the guy, you should go. The Chazani says you should go and give it to another ani. And Derech Sicha, Reb Chaim Kanifsi explains. So like, what's that going to help? I plan on giving it to this ani. He says that when the chayvis of when I have my machshava for tzedakah is only mechayv me that I should go and give it, but not necessarily to that specific ani. It's a chiddush. According to that, I don't have to go and run after the ani, and I could change it from one ani to the next. But either way, I would think you're pater legami because my das was to give it to this ani, and he's gone, so I'm an anis. So there's nothing I could do. But Al Kapani, this is all if you planned on if you had intent to give. What happens if I went and took the money out of my pocket and I wanted to go and give? So it's interesting. Rosh Zalman brings in Perek Beis in Perek Zayin in Alich Shlomo Hari 12. He says that he always had a ton. He used to put the money on the table in front of him, and therefore when people would be going, then you'd have coming to collect. They would take from him. Sometimes he would give a little bit more. He would take it out. Right, and but one time there was an ani that passed by him, and he started running after the ani to go to give it to him, to try to find him. So they asked him, like, why are you so worried about it? He said, you're never worried about it. He said, because my kavanah was that until it gets to the hand of the ani, I'm not mechayev myself anything. That guy was blind, and he didn't realize it touched his hand, he didn't feel it, and therefore maybe that was included in my Kabbalah, so he went to run after him. Someone should definitely have in mind until it gets to his hand. Now, what happens if the ani decides that he doesn't want to take the money? Right? It's considered he wants more. So Pasha says you're putter, but you should go and give it to another ani because you did what you had to do. The ani is over an avla, but in terms of you, right, you're fine. I just mentioned two other shilas. That one is that what happens if let's say someone davened mincha early, right, and then they started davening again. Right, and they started davening again after Plaga Mincha, right? Because if you don't daven Mincha early, most of the time the rule is you don't get to Mincha on time, right? So it's usually like a second minyan. A lot of times, there's minyan Zman, and then there's enough people that come in later on because Erev Shabbos it's hectic. So I daven Mincha, right? I daven Mincha early. I daven my 12:30 Mincha, and now, right, I come to shul, different shul. I got confused. By the way, that stam would be a shayla. What would be? I come to shul and then I start davening again after Plaga Mincha. Does that default into Ma'ariv? That's nothing to do with neder. You'll figure that out yourselves. But shayla happens a few times a year. But let's say I was Makabel Shabbos and then I realized I didn't daven Mincha. So l'chayra you have to be the Levush says in Reish Samach Gimel that Tosefes Shabbos is mitam neder. Okay, so if it's mitam neder, you have to go and be shayl. So you should get three people together, and it seems to be that be a stubborn thing to do to get three people together and be shayl on you didn't realize, and then you can go and daven mincha. But that won't help for your wife. Why? Because your wife already lit candles. So what's she going to do with the bracha? So I'll leave you to think about it.
She also didn't have mincha?
Let's say she didn't have mincha. She was makabel. She always davens mincha. So what does she do? By the end of Mesiris Maidah, you should really have that. You should say, have your wife, Erev Rosh Hashanah, hopefully everyone's on speaking terms. You say to your wife, I'm going to be, appoint me the shliach, and you say, I'm doing it for my wife. You say, V'chein lishti, and they should really say, mutur lachem. Instead of mutur lach, they say mutur lachem.
So what's the story with Erev Rosh Hashanah? So it should erase all this.
But the question is, if stuck is b'chlal neder? Shlomo Zalman says that these things are more like ancillary, meaning they're not a real neder. So therefore, the Mesiris Midah works on these things. But it's not so pashut because these are drashas Chazal. Right? These are drashas Chazal, and in drashas Chazal, they made it like a neder. So who said the Mesiris Midah works on something like this? Reb Shlomo Zalman says he said this meaning Mesiris Midah doesn't work only. It won't work on real nedarim, but in terms of like on Hagas Taiva l'chayra, right? Or in certain things that are like learned that as a drasha, like beficha zut staka. So he wants to say that Rosh Hashanah say that it will be okay. Right? So I think he says on beficha zut staka also. So he says he was at a meeting of the Vadi Yeshivas and he met Rabbi Aaron there and he told it to him and Rabbi Aaron was very happy with it and it was great. And he praised it. Yeah. He said the Mesiris Midah will work on these things. But either way, your wife should, a lot of times women can't come to Kol Nidre. So, also to be matir neder and all these things. So this, whatever. They should be trained to say bli neder. Rosh Hashanah writes when his kid was like, the girl was like 11 in a day, they'd sit them down. It was like intense, they explain to you Nedarim and Trum, and everything you have to. So, anyways, that was the chinuch over there. All right, either way, I just want to leave just one thing over here that we'll finish. That it's just a small ha'ara that it's not Rabbi Cheskel Hartman's machshava, daf, but it's a smaller ha'ara. It's probably an old daf. If not, he'll make sure it's on. Like this, the pasuk says. So when you say liyachel devarai, right? Liyachel devarai means that we shouldn't make your words chulin, right? And the pasuk says kechol asher yotzim mipiv yaseh. So you should make. So it could be like we see when someone makes a neder, they create a reality. They ask for something on themselves. So in that world, it's going to be usher. So the Svarim say that lo yachol devari, don't make your devarim chulin. Make sure that everything's kadosh, everything's good. And kechol yitzim mipiv, whatever leaves your mouth, yaseh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will do. If you're living in that world of kedusha, and you're living in that world where everything's good and it's not chulin, right? That's why you go to tzaddik for bracha, because he's living in that world. He's living in that holy world. I wish to help him that we should be able to take. Right, and be careful with the words, and make sure to say bli neder. And I want to tell you something. It's so beautiful to be in this shul. First of all, I've learned here a few times, and it's a very comfortable feeling. It's a very nice shul. It's just beautiful with Chashav Rav. I'm zecher to have him as a chaver. Shtickle Rebbe, I learned a lot from him.
Rishus Rabbanim, on behalf of my wife Rebecca and our Aunt Jackie, this Siyum should be an Aliyas Neshama for our father-in-law Menachem Avram ben Moshe ben Yamin. If you take all 90 blot of Nedarim and you sum it up into one lesson, that one lesson would be the importance that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants for us on our words. If there's anyone that we know who emulated this more was our father-in-law. His word was his bond, and it's something that we could all learn from him. I'm going to end with the last little story. There is the Nedarim, and I also want to thank Alda for letting us be part of the Siyum, and for all the Gabayim who arranged this, and Max. Hahu noif the all legabe dahu inta. There was this adulterer who entered a house of a certain woman. Asa Gavra, her husband came home. Salak noif isev b'kli bava, and this adulterer, he was hiding behind the curtain. Havi machtan talchatam v'tamin chavya. There was a cress lying around, which is some kind of vegetable in the room, and a poisonous snake went ahead and tasted from it. Presumably leaving behind some poison. Bayimari levesa, the homeowner, the husband was about to eat it. Lemechal min hanuhu tachle below daita dinsa. He had no knowledge that the snake went ahead and left some of its venom behind. Amalei honoif, this adulterer who was hiding behind the door. He screams out, "Lo seichel b'nei chevi, do not eat from this, for a snake has tasted it." So Amarava, and now they had a shiloh, was this lady going to be mutter or not? Amarava, intase shara, his wife is permitted, because im isud ave yisura, because if they already did an iser, nichle delechos v'lemos, he would have preferred that the husband would have died. The chsev kineif v'dam b'neim. Because the pasuk says, and the adulterer have committed, there's blood in his hands, and if someone is chayshid on adultery, then he's chayshid on misa also. So the Gemara then says pshita. So ma'od tema isuri avid, that perhaps they did do an aver and she would be aser to her husband, and the nichle deloy lemis baal, and perhaps the husband would have, the adulterer would have rather the husband not die. That he'd rather have mayim genavim yitaku kamash malan, and therefore kamash malan that this lady is mutter to her husband. Hadron alach ve'elan nedarim v'sagula mesaches nedarim. Do I want to do the hadron? Oh. Hadron Olach Mesechus Nedarim v'Hadroch Alon. Daitach Olach Mesechus Nedarim. Daitach Alon. Lo Nisnei Minach Mesechus Nedarim. Lo Nisnei Minach. Lo Ba'am Hadev. Lo Ba'am Dasei. Here it's almost Fanecha. Adonai Eloheinu v'Lehav Oseinu. Shtei Haratzcha Amun Oseinu B'Elam Hazeh. Tiyimanu Lo Haba. Chanina Bar Papa. Ram Bar Papa. Rachman Bar Papa. Nachman Bar Papa. Achia Bar Papa. Abba Mari Bar Papa. Rafam Bar Papa. Rachash Bar Papa. Sorcha Bar Papa. Adra Bar Papa. Deru Bar Papa, Harav No Adonai Leinu Esder Beis Zacha Befinu B'Yos Amcha Beis Yisrael V'Niyei Kulon Anachnu Tzasinim Tzeitzei Amcha Beis Yisrael Kulon Yidei Shemach Lom Des Zach Lishma Mi Ovet Hachmenu Mitzach Hilu Lam Hili Tamim Uchacha Laman Lo Evosh Lo Eshkach Uchacha Kibam Chayisanu Baruch Atah Adonai Lamani Uchacha Amen 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 Selav Oed Moedim Anachnu Loch Adonai Eloheinu V'Lehav Oseinu Santo Chakeni Moshe Beis Hamidah Shlo Santo Chakeni Moshe Koranis Shana Mashkim V'Hem Mashkim Ana Mashkim Ludever Tar V'Hem Mashkim Ludever B'Telem Ana Amen V'Hem Amen Ana Amen Mekam Sachar V'Hem Amen V'Inam Mekam Sachar Ana Ratzim V'Hem Ratzim Ana Ratzim L'Chayil Am Haba V'Hem Ratzim L'Ber Shachas Shnemer V'Ata Elohim Tar Diim L'Ber Shachas Anchi Damim V'Mir Meloi Yechzu Yemei V'Ani Aftach Bach Yihira Tzalmo Fanecha Adonai Elohai Kshem Shazatani L'Sai Mesechas Nedarim Kain Ta'azreinu L'Haskal Mesechas Esfarim Achirim L'Samim L'Limu L'Lami L'Ishma L'Asas L'Kai is called the Reis Amatar Secha Be'ava Schos Kol Tanayim V'Amarayim Ta'amidei Chacham Yam Levi L'Zari Shlo Tamush Hatar M'Pi Zari Adolam V'Skayim Bi His Halacha Tancha Escha B'Shachvucha Tishmar Alecha V'Hakitosi Hitishchacha Kibi Yirbo Yemecha V'Yosifo L'Chal Shmo Eskayim Orach Yamim B'Yaminu V'Yismela Orsha V'Chavad Adonai Zametan Adonai Baruch Sama Shalom.